As the voice of God said, I'm at Georgia Tech. I came back to my alma mater after 40 years of work in healthcare management. And I created a course in the College of Business entitled Management in the Healthcare Sector. And each time, this is the 7th time I've taught the course, I have one unit where I say, what disease has been on a rapidly declining mortality rate curve since 1994? Cancer. And then I say, why? How did that happen? And they're bright students. Several of them are here, and I'm very proud of them. And they get it pretty quickly. They always say, well, it was the National Cancer Act of 1971 that started this robust research agenda. It was creative things like using the tobacco settlement for creative purposes, like creating the Georgia Cancer Coalition. And it was regulations, the prevention of smoking indoors began to drive down smoking rates. And all those things are exactly right. But ladies and gentlemen, mostly it's about people. And those people are the people I'd like to introduce you to now. My colleagues and good friends, George Daneker from the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, Lynn Lichtenfield from the American Cancer Society, John McDonald from Georgia Tech, and Cynthia Wetmore from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Welcome. I've known Lynn the longest, so I'm going to start with him. Lynn, your organization, the American Cancer Society, has been located with its headquarters here in my hometown, Atlanta, Georgia, for 26 years now, 26 out of your 101 years. I'm sure that Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport is a big benefit to you, but tell us about the benefits of being neighbors to your partners in public health and prevention, the CDC. For the first few years, you were directly across the street.
Well, thanks, Bill. Yeah, it is true. We moved to Atlanta back in 1988. And, right now I think Hartsfield probably is one of the biggest advantages, particularly for me, because we spend a lot of time going from William Street to the airport, so we really appreciate that proximity. And we can go anywhere in the world. But the reality is, when the American Cancer Society made the decision to come here to Atlanta back in 1988, it was part of a competitive process. And one of the things that's really critically important is that Atlanta stood up and stood out, and here we are. And the attraction, of course, our location was on Clifton Road, was CDC right across the street. Emory is also basically right across the street. And then back in 2006, 2007, we moved downtown to Atlanta near Olympic Park. But it is that critical mass. In both of those occasions, there were some drivers, and some of the drivers were obviously the educational environment here in Atlanta, the resources available in Atlanta, and also as we moved downtown, the possibility of being associated with other nonprofits and the visibility. But clearly, and I think what's been seen today, and I'm thrilled actually on behalf of the society to be part of this program today, and the society clearly is pleased to be part of this. You've seen it all day long. You've seen the young entrepreneurs with ideals, you've seen the education, you've seen the infrastructure, you've seen the commitment. And that is what clearly is, and will always continue to be part of the fact that we appreciate being here in Atlanta, being part of Atlanta, and having Atlanta be very much a part of us.
Thanks, George. I've enjoyed my association, not only from being on the team that recruited them to Atlanta, 26 years ago, but also on the board of directors for 6 years, and I enjoyed working with you, Lynn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, George, you're one of the newest assets, Cancer
We are.
Treatment Centers of America, to Atlanta, following on the heels of your other centers of excellence around the country. Share with us how that's gone and what are patient volumes like compared to your pro forma plans?
Well, thanks a lot, Bill. We appreciate those being here. For us, it's been actually a great surprise that we opened about 2 years ago. Currently, that we're into our 5-year growth plan. We've attracted multiples of the number of patients from the region that we thought we were going to see. We've expanded the number of our employees. We call them stakeholders. We started with a Valiant band of about 120. We're now up to 800. And for a culture-driven corporation, actually it presents some challenges to maintain culture. I think we've done that pretty well. We started out, I was actually the first physician recruited. We started out with 6 full-time docs at opening. Now we're up to 200 with about 40 full-time docs. So that has been an interesting and dizzying growth. We've kind of referred to it, as not only building the airplane in flight, but we've also changed out the engines once while we were building it. So it's been an interesting growth. It's been great to be here. We actually ended up in Atlanta. Combination, patient's choice really drives what we do. We saw we were seeing a lot of patients from the southeast, and that the airport clearly was a draw for us, as well as the fact that has been alluded to, and Len alluded to, a lot of great talent here in Atlanta, a lot of great partnerships, academic partnerships, and others. So, it's been, I think for us, it's been a very pleasurable success story.
Great. Well, welcome. We're glad
Thank
you're
you.
here. Cynthia has come to us at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta from St. Jude, which everybody knows. Cynthia, I got in big trouble when I was the CEO of the Georgia Cancer Coalition by saying to a childhood cancer advocate that there are only 300 new cases of childhood cancer in Georgia each year. And I was trying to make the case of why we were focusing on the big 4 with most of our investments, and she was advocating for more funding for childhood cancer. And she let me know in uncertain terms that I was missing the point that although there are only 300, it's a huge impact on a whole ecosystem with the school, the church, the neighborhood, and each child who's diagnosed is a major challenge. You take care of almost all of those at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Tell us some of the ways that you engage with many of the other healthcare assets in Atlanta. How do you work with the other institutions that are represented here?
Yeah. Well, part of the draw in my coming to Atlanta, really, I've been here 4 months now, and I'm thrilled to be here. It's been a wonderful collaborative environment, and that was one of the aspects that drew me to Atlanta. I think the very powerful collaboration between Emory and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and then also Georgia Tech and Morehouse, and just the whole community here is embracing children. And in my larger role, I also direct the new Center for Clinical and Translational Research for all of the Department of Pediatrics and Children's. So together we're trying to build the infrastructure and clinical trials network, and also collaborating with the CDC and some of the very difficult health challenges for children, obesity and asthma, some of them.
I want to come back to that clinical trials issue in a minute because nobody does it better than children's cancer.
Exactly.
John, other panelists deal with all cancers, but primarily you have focused on deeply understanding the biology of a single deadly disease, ovarian cancer. And you are the leader of the highly regarded Ovarian Cancer Institute. This is a cancer that cannot be easily detected, and that's the major problem, and you look for a biomarker to solve that problem. You have a remarkable model in which your laboratory at Georgia Tech has a robust collaboration with a community hospital as a clinical partner. Tell us about that model and how it works and why it works so amazingly well.
All right. First of all, I think I should start off apologizing for these shoes.
They're good, they're good.
I've been away all week, and I missed the conference call where dress code was discussed.
John, I
Well,
wouldn't know you in dress shoes.
You look
You
like
look
a
just
professor
fine.
of biology.
Black shoes, black
Right,
shoes.
so let me just give a little background. Yes, I'm involved in the Ovarian Cancer Institute, but I'm also director of this Integrated Cancer Research Center at Georgia Tech. And the whole concept of that is to try to bring together expertise in areas that normally don't collaborate with respect to cancer. So I try to facilitate and leverage the strengths in analytical chemistry, molecular biology, nanotechnology, and probably most importantly, computer science. Because as we move more and more into cancer research in the future, we're going to be doing more and more high throughput technologies, sequencing. Bill referred to the biomarkers we've developed. We were using metabolic, using mass spec things. So we're dealing with huge amounts of data. And I think as we look more and more at patient samples, I think we're realizing that cancer is not a disease like other diseases where there's only one gene involved or a few genes. It's really a system-wide breakdown. And I think what's becoming more and more important is not the particular genes that are associated with a cancer in a particular patient, but the way interactions between those genes change in patients. This becomes a problem because if we're looking for a biomarker, the answer is there's not going to be one biomarker for even one disease like ovarian cancer. Somebody can have a mutation in that gene and not have cancer. Someone else can not have a mutation in that gene and have cancer. And what we're finding is you really have to take a systems-wide look at this, and that's where bioinformatics and computer science is really becoming important. And that's where I think Georgia Tech can play a role in the future of cancer research.
Well, you're clearly the right guy for this panel then. All those issues are what caused this group to come together in the first place. Thank you, John. Let me ask you all to comment on your own experiences in finding talent in this community. Your laboratories and clinical environments require lots of very highly skilled people. George has hired hundreds since he's been here. Are you able to find the skill sets that you need in your cancer work? And do we need to focus on manpower planning in any area whatsoever? Lynn?
Well, I think there are a number of aspects of that question. I think first off, there's obviously an incredibly rich talent pool within this community, within this state, within this region. And when we talk about the American Cancer Society, we have a national imprint, we have a state, we have a local imprint, and we are certainly able to get outstanding talent. In fact, if you go through some of our research folks, you'll find that they come from CDC or Emory to us, and we go from us back to Emory, CDC, and Georgia Tech. So there's a lot of exchange, shall we say, that goes on. I think the other piece that you mentioned is an important one, because we have sat here today, and I think Health Connect South, by doing this today, has really brought us together to share common experiences. You mentioned training and manpower. So I'm going to give a plug that may be a little bit off to the side of what you had intended by saying the development of manpower, that piece, the educational piece from the very fundamental, the technical college piece, and the educational piece at our universities is a critical part of the success of this community and of this state. And frankly, if I can, maybe it sounds like a pitch, and it is a pitch. It's something that we as an organizations must make a commitment to see that it's always at the top of that agenda, because we all, everyone here, and I would hope my colleagues would agree, we all benefit from that. And my wife happens to be on the board of education for the state school board, and also was on the technical college board, so I fulfilled my obligation to my wife by saying that. But I really mean it from my heart, because it's critically important to the success of any organization within this community.
George, you're in the marketplace now.
Yeah, I mean, let me answer the question, the kind of twofold answer. I guess the first, from clinical talent, you know, we've actually been able to attract some top clinical talent here in Georgia. You know, but the fact is we're growing, we will continue to grow, and that there really is currently, I mean, there's certainly a finite amount. And so one of the strategies that we've used is to really to produce a very attractive environment for people to come from the outside as well. So we have both a mix of local talent, but also talent that we brought from otherwise, very well-known national institutions. So clinical talent. The second is that obviously, we're mostly about treatment, but we do embark in research, and we've found great opportunities. For instance, we've worked with Dr. McDonald's lab for the last couple of years and actually have a grant with Dr. McDonald's lab. We've worked with the people over at Clark Atlanta. We have relationships with the Georgia Regents and Morehouse that are developing, and some other colleges, University of West Georgia. We have University of Alabama. So we found that this is a very fertile environment, and we really look at opportunities to partner with universities, particularly research universities that have opportunities for biomedical research, but they don't necessarily always have an easy access to the clinicians and to clinical entities. And so we like to provide that partnership, and we found that to be very rewarding for us so far.
Good. Now, John, I guess you train your own talent pool, right?
Yeah, well, I have a head start because Georgia Tech has very good students. And one of the problems is they leave. You wish they could hang around. But what's really important for us, again, as a technical school, not associated with a medical school, is to collaborate with people like George. And I think it's really useful because I would consider myself more of a basic research scientist. And usually the connection between basic research scientists and clinicians is almost non-existent. That things go through basic research, go into translational research, and then there's interactions. But we found it's been very profitable to make connections with physicians at early stages of research because it helps guide us in the directions that we want that to go. George, before he went into higher administration at CTCA, used to come to our weekly lab meetings every week and would have input on some of the basic work that we're doing.
And I think to follow that a little bit is what John taught me, and we've seen as valuable, is that the entities that are really going to make huge contributions, like John says, who would have thought that mathematics and systems engineering would actually probably drive a lot of the innovation and the breakthrough? But by having collaborations with institutions like John, it really starts us looking at new directions and new collaborations we might not have if we'd stayed just within the biological sciences.
Well, Cynthia, you've been here 3 months, so you're still learning about all the different peach trees.
Right.
It's a lifelong.
But
But I already have a collaboration with Georgia Tech.
well, good. Well, tell us about it. Tell us about it, and have you been able to assess the marketplace yet of talent?
Well, so about the collaboration, it's been a really tremendous opportunity to be able to partner with people at Georgia Tech. One of the things that I deal with clinically, I take care of children with brain tumors in particular, and I lead the developmental therapeutics program. And so we're often consenting these families at a very emotional time and telling them about a new drug. And this might be a first in pediatrics trial, for example, and it's very, very stressful for the family, for the children. And I spend time going over it again and again, and I meet with them on several different occasions. So I was thinking about it, and I thought that it would be very helpful to have something like an app and some age-appropriate storytelling so that the kids can, one of the big questions is how big is the pill? So we could have a little picture of the pill. So I'm working with Georgia Tech then to come up with an app so that we can get some information to families before they actually come into clinic and they can start thinking of questions.
Well, I want to stay with you because you said a key word there. You said in the process of obtaining consent. And so that is a critical step in developing clinical trials. And as you know, in the U.S., we only have about 3% of the population on clinical trials. And we set out in Georgia to raise that, and we built some beautiful relationships between our academic medical centers and community hospitals where 85% of the care is actually delivered. And so we have community physicians like George working with our academic medical center partners to drive that up, and we have gotten up as high as 10%. So tell us about why is it that children do so much better. You're way on up there. You're up at the 70, 80%.
Well, we're really 90% of
90%.
children are treated on clinical trials, and that is a testament to how well children and pediatricians play well together. There's a lot less money involved in caring for children, so the economic drivers are less strong. I think also because of the very small numbers. In order to make progress in understanding the etiology and treatment of cancer, we really need to collaborate, and we need to agree on how we're going to treat childhood ALL or a bone tumor in children. But I think that the adults are coming along, and I think economic drivers are drawing them together, and it's the only way to really make advances in cancer is to do it through clinical collaborative trials.
Well, George, you've got direct contact, like Cynthia's talking about, talking to patients and explaining to them why it's in their best interest to get over this feeling that you're being experimented with and participate in the latest breakthrough and get to it first. Tell us about how that works.
You know, it is, and I think that, you know, for us that we've really gone aggressively into molecular profiling. Actually, John taught me well that the importance of genomics and all that, we've gone aggressively. And really, we've linked that to patients with the understanding that the best way to really pursue that for them is in clinical trials. You know, are we as successful as I'd like to be? No. You know, we're faced with, you know, some hurdles that, first of all, you know, we've got distance. And because we're a regional center that sees patients from average about 200 miles away, we've got to deal with the distance factor. And we're talking about, you know, how can we push that further out to the community? You know, we've got the fact that medical oncologists are busy. They're seeing lots of patients. The clinical trials process is not very efficient for oncologists. And finally, to make the system set up so we can more easily identify patients, so we can really talk to them like you did ahead of time using things like apps and other technologies to let them know what's appropriately out there, and to really to kind of tell them that, you know, this is not experimentation. This really, given the new frontier of where we are, particularly with genomics, this is your best chance to have an opportunity.
And I'd also like to clarify that in cancer, there is no placebo. We don't ever,
Right.
it's unethical.
I think that's very important.
And so they're not being experimented on. These drugs go through extensive testing, and it's an opportunity to try something brand new that has never been tried in that type of cancer.
So you get the standard of care or whatever is thought to be better, and if it turns out it's not making that progress, you fall back to the standard of
But
care.
the comparison arm is always standard of care.
Very
It's not
important
a placebo.
point. Very important point. Lynn, you're up there at the big macro policy level. What things is the society doing to help the American public get on board and almost demand clinical trials? If I were a patient, I would say, I want the latest best.
Well, you know, and I will clearly say that this is an incredibly important discussion, incredibly important topic, because we are going through a revolution in cancer care, and if we are going to be successful, aside from just making sure that our infrastructure and our basic fundamental research enterprise is funded, we do need to find new ways of getting the drug to the patient where the person is, the person and the family and the doctor. And we need new systems, we need new approaches, we need to understand the impact of genomics. So yes, we're involved in a lot of policy discussions on trying to make that happen, but there is a lot, and because as I was saying before we came out here, with the use of genomics, every cancer will be an individual, unique cancer. It will be a rare cancer, and we will have to have an approach to that. And with the outstanding work that researchers like Dr. McDonald are doing, we're having so many what we call druggable targets, and we've only been able to assess perhaps, one estimate I heard was 5% of those targets. So a huge opportunity to really have to transform the system and make that happen. The American Cancer Society is obviously supported through fundamental basic research, but we've also supported new approaches to trials, such as using what are called master protocols. So that for the model now is squamous cell lung cancer of the lung, a disease unfortunately has very little therapeutic option, 5 drugs, genomic testing. If you have one of the targets, you get assigned to one of the 4 drugs that are being studied, and if you don't, you get an immunotherapy drug, and that will be an adaptive trial over time, and hopefully will serve as a model. So what we're fortunate here in Georgia is, and under Bill's leadership, the sense was set that cancer was important. It was important at the research level, it was important at the care level, and as you've heard, important at the clinical trial level. We need to take that with all of the tools that we're going to have that we need to make sure it's available at the local level to everyone who could potentially benefit from the discoveries that we are making virtually, literally every day now.
Well said, Lynn, thank you. Well, John, you said a minute ago, you're a basic scientist, and so you're not involved in the translation, but you are eager to see your discoveries benefit mankind. We got people like Todd Shearer who devote their entire lives to that process that's part art, part science, and a lot of hand-holding. Can you give us, in our closing comment, your most satisfying experience of a discovery you made in the basic science laboratory getting to a patient?
Well, first of all, I think the time gap between basic research discoveries and patient is much, much shorter nowadays than it has been in the past. I mean, discoveries are made. And so, for example, on this diagnostic test that we developed, we now know that we can actually detect ovarian cancer with extremely high accuracy, much higher than CA-125 with the standard kind of test. And so it's been really satisfying to see that kind of pan out. We're at the point now where we have to go into clinical trials. And so someone in a position like me, of course not experienced that, would really need to be in a context where that can be done quickly. And we need to work on accelerating that process, I think, in Georgia, so that we can go from these major discoveries into benefiting patients as quickly as possible. I don't think we want to have gaps of 4 or 5 years in between those kind of things.
Well, thank you for those discoveries. We appreciate that. I began, ladies and gentlemen, by saying that the declining mortality rate, which everybody desires, is due to some policies, some laws, some regulations, some initiatives, but primarily is due to people. And these are the people. Let's give them a hand.